Now, Liberia has attracted a lot of interest, especially in the iron ore mining sector. It's reported that about 6 major deals worth $10 billion have been signed since the administration of Ellen Johnson Sirleaf came into power. Just tell us about mining opportunities that exist in Liberia.
There are wonderful opportunities in the mining sector, both in the brown and green fields. In other words, the brown field will be those iron ore resources that were mined before the turbulence, and of course people now, because of the demand for iron ore in China and in the Middle East, there has been there's a resurgence of demand for iron ore. And so we have both a high demand for iron ore, and so we are capitalizing on that. In recent times, we have, as I said, gone into about 6 major concession agreements, both brown field and green fields. Those brown fields include China Union in the Bong Mines area, formerly Bong Mines, now China Union. In Metal Steel, was formerly the Swedish company, now Metal Steel. The green fields include Putu. We signed with Putu already, and we already signed with BHP Billiton, but BHP Billiton is also a green field in the Gold Foundry and Kitama mine. So right. It's exciting at this period of time because the demand is high from China and of course from the Middle East, and we want to make sure that we can increase our revenue so that we can respond to our infrastructural development.
Right. We'll speak about those infrastructural issues in a second. Just in terms of incentivizing investments from abroad, some issues that have been raised, for instance, is the kinds of contracts you enter into with the mining companies. They'd like to be able to have autonomy in setting the price for iron ore as opposed to the government being involved. They're also calling for a moratorium on the tax break of about 5 years and saying extend it. So what are you doing to just make investment a little bit more attractive?
You know, we have a mineral development agreement we refer to as an MDA. And in that MDA, we have the financial aspects of the MDA, we have the management aspects, we also have the fiscal aspect that determines the royalty, and government sets the royalty. For iron ore, it is 4.5%. Except that it is an agreement or some kind of a concessioning where we find out that the ore is not enriched enough, and so we can bargain on that by reducing the royalty. We did that for China Union, and we've done that also for BHP Billiton, where we came down from 4.5% of the royalty to 3.25% on a scaling rate. I mean that by the time the ore gets up to a very high rate through beneficiation, we go back to 4.5%. But it's the government that determines the fiscal aspects of the iron ore, not the concessionaire. As I said, we are in full control when it comes to that.
There's also news, as you mentioned earlier on, of the infrastructure investments. You mentioned Billiton, but also reports of companies like ArcelorMittal coming in to help with the building of railways for easy shipment of commodities, for instance. How have these deals been structured just in terms of the soft loans, the agreements on job creation, and the broader infrastructure developments being entered into?
First of all, what we did when we assumed leadership role in 2006, President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, what she did, she recalled the contract. And so we had an addendum to the contract. And in that addendum, we took over the infrastructure. In other words, the government of Liberia took over the rail and the port, and it belonged to us. And we did on land, that rail and the port to Metal Steel. So that we have what we call a tripartite arrangement. Metal Steel doesn't 100% guarantee the utilization of the rail and the port. If there's a third party coming in, for instance, we're going to be having BSGR Valley coming in soon to transit the iron ore from Guinea. And so we have a tripartite arrangement between Metal Steel, Valley, BSGR, and the government of Liberia for the utilization of that corridor where the oil is going to be transited from Samadou north of Guinea, coming through Liberia down to the port of Buchanan. And through that means we're going to be able to develop our infrastructure. In addition to that, through some form of a fiscal responsibility or social responsibility, Metal Steel has agreed to bitumize, to pave the road from Ganta through Sanikole to Yekepa. That part of their fiscal, their social responsibility that Mr. Mittal has agreed to do. We're also going to have a valley when they bring down their rail and develop a new port next to Buchanan. they're going to have a passenger train attached to the iron ore train so that it can also transport goods and passengers. We're going to have passenger and freight, where passenger and their goods will be transported within that corridor. So in terms of their physical, their social response, they're going to do that infrastructure element. Right. Also employment is part of the MDA, the Mineral Development Agreement in Metal Steel, and the IDA of Vale. IDA is the Infrastructure Development Agreement. And all of those will include the social dimensions. That means employment is part of the social contract, hospitals, schools, and many other social amenities in terms of markets and other things will be a part of that. So make sure that that environment lives after the iron ore, because you're quite aware iron ore is an extractive industry. It's non-renewable. Once it's gone, it's gone.
We know that Liberia comes from a horrible civil war that's really decimated infrastructure, and that's a major impediment for investment. One of the biggest concerns is electricity supply, and I know that there is a program to try to rectify that situation through a hydro plant on the St. Paul River, but it will only supply initially about 64 megawatts. The country needs a lot more. What's being done to overcome the shortfall, and how must companies who invest in Liberia overcome some of these infrastructure deficits?
Okay, the president in his good vision realized that quite well. She knew that there was 64 megawatts that was provided before our turbulence, and so that was for Monrovia City. We see the demand now, and against that demand factor, she said that we should develop the entire St. Paul River basin. We have another tributary that comes into the St. Paul called the Via River. That's the reservoir. And so instead of just looking at the 64 megawatt for Monrovia, what it used to be, we are augmenting it up to between 800 to 1,000 megawatts. Putting the Via Reservoir into function and augmenting from 64 to 1,000, that way we'll be able to respond to the demand from these 6 mining companies. And then and also for the city and all the facilities within the city. So we are quite cognizant of that and working towards that whole St. Paul River basin to develop it fully.
Just talking about donors, and very briefly, those who've been critical of the level of donor involvement in Liberia say that you should be very careful not to mortgage the assets of Liberia in 25-year concession arrangements with countries like China and India. How do you respond to that?
Well, we have a well-developed MDA arrangement that no one person will come and exclusively do things against us, against our favor. The Liberian government does not support exclusivity. Okay, so that no way one country will come and capitalize the country. And so whether it's China, whether it is India, whether it's Europe, whether it's America, we have an agreement that all live by. And so we are quite in charge of that. All our fiscal review, we have long sessions of discussing the concession, and then after that, it goes to cabinet, where it is reviewed, then it goes to the legislature, where it is ratified, before it goes back to the president for signature and put into handbills.